Close your eyes. Now imagine they never opened. Not you, not just you. Everyone. Every human being who ever walked this earth. Born without sight. Living without light. Building without the ability to see what they were building. What would that world look like? The first thing you need to understand is this. Blindness would not stop civilization. It would redirect it. Cities would still rise, not built for eyes, but for ears, for hands, for skin. Streets would be designed around sound, the echo of a building, the texture of a sidewalk, the direction of wind between towers. Architecture would become music. Space would become something you feel before you understand it. You would know a place by its smell before its shape. You would recognize a person by the warmth of their presence before the color of their face. Touch would become the primary language of trust. A handshake would carry the weight of a look. A hand on the shoulder, the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. In a blind world, you could not pretend to be present. You either were or you weren't. Technology would develop differently. Not screens, sound. Not images, vibration. The entire infrastructure of human communication would be rebuilt around the senses we take for granted. Books would never have been visual. Music would have been the dominant art form from the beginning of recorded history. Theater would be entirely tactile, spatial, sensorial. You might think this world would be primitive. You would be wrong. It would simply be built around different things. And here is where it gets interesting, because what it would not be built around might surprise you. Racism as we know it would not exist. Let that sit for a moment. Not because humans would be less tribal, we would still find reasons to divide. But the specific machinery of racial hierarchy built over centuries, erected almost entirely on the visible difference of skin color, would have no foundation. You cannot build a system of oppression around something no one can see. The entire history of colonialism, of slavery, of apartheid, dependent on the eye's ability to categorize a human being in under a second and assign them a value. Remove sight, and that mechanism collapses before it is ever built. We did not invent racism out of fear. We invented it out of sight. Beauty standards would not exist, or rather, they would be unrecognizable to us. There would be no billion-dollar cosmetics industry, no weight loss culture built on appearance, no architecture of shame constructed around how your body looks to someone across a room. The cruelty of the playground, the child mocked for a visible difference, for the shape of their nose, the color of their skin, the way their body moves through space. That particular cruelty would be impossible. Status itself would not disappear, but it would have to be earned differently. Not by what you wear, not by what you drive, not by what your face looks like or the color of the skin you were born in. Status in a blind world would be built on what you say, how you move through space with others, how you treat the people closest to you. On reputation built over time, not impression built in a second. In a blind world, you could not fake a first impression. The only impression you could make was a real one. But let's not romanticize blindness, because the question was never really about blindness. It was about what we choose to do with sight. In a world without vision, human connection would be built on something more demanding than appearance. It would require presence, attention, the willingness to actually listen. You cannot scroll past a person you cannot see. You cannot look at your phone while someone speaks to you if your phone gives you nothing to look at. You cannot pretend someone is not there if their voice fills the space between you. Presence would not be a virtue. It would be a necessity. Touch would become sacred, not sexual, sacred. The hand that guides, the arm that steadies, the shoulder that says, "I am here," even in the dark. Studies on communities where blindness is common show something remarkable. Rates of physical affection, of communal care, of what researchers call social bonding through proximity, are significantly higher. Not because blind people are inherently kinder, but because sight allows distance. Blindness demands closeness. The man in the expensive suit and the man sleeping on the sidewalk. In a world where neither can be seen, what separates them? Their voice, their story, their need. And need, as it turns out, is the great equalizer. When we cannot perform our status, when we cannot display our difference, when the first thing we communicate is simply, "I am a person and I need," something in the social contract shifts. We become, against our will, equal. But here is the thing. You open your eyes, and none of this is true. The world you see when you open your eyes is not more connected, not more equal, not built on presence and voice and need. It is built on a screen that tracks your gaze and sells it, on a beauty standard that shifts every decade so the industry never loses customers, on a man in a suit who has been trained since childhood to not see the man on the sidewalk, not because he cannot, but because he has learned that looking means responsibility. So we look away. We have the most powerful optical instruments in the history of life on this planet. We can see bacteria. We can see galaxies. We can see the surface of Mars from 140 million miles away. And we walk past each other on the street like ghosts. We are not blind. We have simply learned not to see. There is a difference. A blind person has no choice but to reach out, to listen, to be present, to depend, to trust. We have every choice. And again, we choose distance. We choose the screen over the room, the profile over the person, the image over the truth. We live in a world of extraordinary visual abundance, and we have never been more alone. So what would a world of blind people actually look like? We don't know, but we know what it wouldn't look like. It wouldn't look like us scrolling past suffering because it doesn't interrupt the algorithm. It wouldn't look like two people sitting at a table, each looking at a different screen in the same silence. It wouldn't look like a child learning to evaluate their own body before they learn to read. It wouldn't look like a man building a wall so he doesn't have to see what his neighbor lives like. I don't think blindness would save us. I don't think removing a sense would automatically restore the ones we've let atrophy. But I think there is something worth sitting with in this thought. The creatures most dependent on sight are often the least capable of seeing what is right in front of them. What if the problem was never that we couldn't see? What if it was always that we could and looked away? Close your eyes again. What do you hear in the room you're in right now? What do you feel? Who is near you right now that you haven't truly looked at in a long time? We were given sight. We built telescopes to see other planets. We built microscopes to see things smaller than thought. And somewhere in the process, we forgot to look at each other.